The colony under siege. The twin suns of Nexus Prime cast long purple shadows across the crystal fields as Elder Morvac watched another harvest transport lift off from the mining platform. The Vorthak had built their colony well over the past 50 years. What started as a small mining outpost had grown into a thriving community of 30,000 souls, all working together to extract the rare Ziridium crystals that powered half the galaxy's communication networks. Morvac's 6 arms moved in the traditional gesture of contentment as he surveyed their achievements. The Vorthak were a peaceful species, standing nearly 8 feet tall with smooth gray skin and large, gentle eyes that reflected wisdom earned through centuries of cooperation. They had no weapons beyond mining tools, no armies beyond volunteer security teams. Violence was foreign to their nature. The crystal spires of their main city gleamed like frozen lightning in the afternoon light. Each building had been grown rather than built, using their natural ability to shape crystal formations through harmonic resonance. Gardens filled with bioluminescent plants created a soft glow that never faded, making their world beautiful even in darkness. Children played in the courtyards while their parents worked the mines, their laughter echoing through streets that had never known fear. In the engineering sector, Zeta-9 calibrated the colony's communication array with practiced precision. She was young for a Vorthak, barely past her first century, and her enthusiasm for technology made her invaluable to the colony's infrastructure. The massive antenna dishes could reach across 3 sectors of space, allowing them to maintain contact with trading partners and the few other peaceful worlds in this region of the galaxy. Dr. Keva finished her rounds at the medical center, noting with satisfaction that the most serious case today had been a minor crystal-cutting accident. The Vorthak rarely got sick, and their advanced medical knowledge meant that serious injuries were almost unknown. She allowed herself a moment of pride in how safe and healthy their community had become. Everything changed in the space of a heartbeat. The first sign of trouble came when the sky began to darken with shadows that had nothing to do with clouds. Ships, massive and angular, dropped out of hyperspace directly above the colony. Their hulls were blood-red with black markings that veterans of the Outer Rim would have recognized immediately. The Crimson Horde had found them. Commander Thrix stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Ravager, and smiled with predatory satisfaction. The Vorthak colony spread out below him like a ripe fruit waiting to be plucked. His reptilian features twisted into an expression of cruel anticipation as he studied the sensor readings. No military installations, no defensive platforms, no armed vessels. This would be easier than taking candy from a hatchling. The Crimson Horde was everything the Vorthak were not. They were raiders, slavers, and destroyers who swept through the Outer Rim like a plague. Their ships were built for war, bristling with weapons and armor. Their crews were recruited from the most violent species in known space, united only by their love of conquest and cruelty. They took what they wanted and destroyed what they could not use. "Begin the assault," Frix commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had devastated 100 worlds. "Target their communication arrays first. I want them isolated and helpless." The attack began with surgical precision. Energy beams lanced down from the Horde ships, striking the communication towers that Zeta-9 had been calibrating just moments before. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers across the colony as vital infrastructure crumbled under the bombardment. The few patrol ships the Vorthak maintained for asteroid mining were vaporized before they could even launch. Elder Morvac felt the ground shake beneath his feet as the first explosions echoed across the crystal fields. His peaceful world was being torn apart by forces he barely understood. He activated the colony's emergency broadcast system, his voice carrying across every speaker in the settlement. "Citizens of Nexus Prime, we are under attack by unknown hostile forces. Proceed immediately to the emergency shelters in the lower mining tunnels. Stay calm, stay together, and do not attempt to fight back. This is not a drill." Zeta-9 watched in horror as her beautiful communication array collapsed in a shower of sparks and twisted metal. But even as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Her engineering mind began working on solutions. If she could jury-rig the backup transmitters, maybe they could send out a distress signal. Maybe someone would hear them. She raced through the collapsing corridors toward the backup communication station, dodging falling debris and terrified colonists. The Vorthak were not built for running, but fear gave them speed they had never needed before. Behind her, she could hear the sound of enemy shuttles landing, bringing the horror directly to their streets. The Crimson Horde soldiers poured out of their landing craft like a tide of destruction. They were mostly Kruleks, a species of armored humanoids with a culture built around warfare and domination. Their plasma weapons cut through crystal walls like they were made of paper. They shot first and asked questions never, leaving devastation in their wake. Dr. Keva helped elderly Vorthak into the medical center's emergency shelter, but she knew it would not protect them for long. The walls were thick crystal, but they were designed to keep out weather, not military-grade weapons. She could hear the distinctive whine of plasma rifles getting closer. In the mining tunnels deep beneath the colony, 30,000 Vorthak huddled in darkness. The tunnels were extensive, carved out over decades of crystal extraction, but they were never meant to be hiding places. The air was thin and space was limited. Families pressed together, sharing what little comfort they could offer. Elder Morvac moved through the tunnels, offering what reassurance he could to his people. His 6 arms touched shoulders and heads, providing the physical comfort that was so important to Vorthak culture. But inside, his hearts were breaking. He had led these people to what he thought would be a safe haven, far from the conflicts that plagued the inner systems. Instead, he had brought them to a trap. "Elder Morvac," came a voice from the darkness. It was Zeta 9, covered in dust and breathing hard. "I managed to activate the emergency beacon before the main array was destroyed. It is broadcasting our location and situation on all emergency frequencies." A murmur of hope rippled through the nearest group of colonists. Perhaps rescue would come. Perhaps someone out there would hear their plea and send help. But Morvac had lived long enough to know the harsh realities of the Outer Rim. The big governments did not waste resources on distant colonies. The trading companies would not risk their profits for people who could not pay. They were alone. Above ground, Commander Thrix was growing impatient. His forces had secured the surface quickly, but the real prize was the Zeridium crystals stored in the processing facilities and the population that could be sold in the slave markets of the Inner Rim. The Vorthak had gone to ground like burrowing creatures, and it was taking longer than expected to dig them out. "Use the sonic disruptors," he ordered his lieutenant. "Collapse some of the tunnel entrances. Drive them into the deeper sections where they cannot escape." The sonic weapons sent devastating vibrations through the crystal formations that made up much of the colony's structure. Underground, the Vorthak felt the tunnels shake and heard the ominous cracking of stressed crystal. Some passages collapsed entirely, cutting off escape routes and trapping groups of colonists in dead ends. Zeta 9 worked frantically with the emergency beacon, boosting its power by drawing energy from life support systems. It was a dangerous gamble that would cost them precious air, but their only hope was to get their message farther into space. Someone had to hear them. Someone had to care enough to help. Hours passed in the darkness. The air grew thinner as more power was diverted to the beacon. Children cried quietly while their parents whispered reassurances they did not believe. Dr. Keva distributed the last of the emergency oxygen canisters to the youngest and oldest, knowing it would not be enough. The Crimson Horde soldiers found the first tunnel entrance and began pouring smoke gas into the passages. It was not lethal, but it made breathing even more difficult and forced the Vorthak deeper into the tunnel system. Thrix wanted them alive for the slave markets, but he was willing to kill the weakest ones to make the others more compliant. Elder Morvac felt his strength failing as the hours dragged on. He was old, even by Vorthak standards, and the thin air was taking its toll. But he continued to move through the tunnels, providing what comfort he could to his people. If these were to be their final hours, he would spend them serving others, as a leader should. How much longer can the beacon broadcast? he asked Zeta 9 when he found her huddled over the makeshift transmitter. "Perhaps 2 more hours at current power levels," she replied, her voice weak from exhaustion. "After that, life support will fail completely." Morvac placed one of his hands on her shoulder. "You have done well, young engineer. If help comes, it will be because of your efforts." But as the darkness pressed in around them, and the air grew thinner with each breath, hope began to fade. The beacon continued to scream their desperate plea into the void, but the void seemed empty of anyone who cared. The Crimson Horde was winning, as they always did. Another peaceful world would fall, another innocent population would be enslaved or killed, and the galaxy would be a little darker than before. In the deepest tunnels, where the youngest children had been taken for safety, a small Vorthak named Kelly pressed close to her mother and whispered a question that cut through the despair like a knife. "Mama, why does no one come to help us?" Her mother had no answer. In all their centuries of peaceful civilization, they had never learned to fight back against those who chose violence over cooperation. They could only wait, hope, and slowly die in the darkness while their world burned above them. Humanity arrives. 18 light-years away from Nexus Prime, Captain Sarah Chen was reviewing patrol reports in her ready room aboard the UH Defiant when the emergency beacon pierced through the background noise of space communications like a scream in the dark. The sound made her coffee cup rattle against the metal desk as the ship's powerful receivers locked onto the desperate transmission. "Captain, to the bridge," came the urgent voice of Lieutenant Marcus Webb over the comm system. "We have a priority distress call. Multiple civilian casualties reported." Chen was moving before he finished speaking. She had been commanding deep space patrol vessels for 12 years, and she knew that tone meant someone was dying while she wasted time. The Defiant was a Ranger-class cruiser, built by humans for humans, designed to operate far from support in the dangerous regions where other species feared to travel. The bridge was a study in controlled chaos when she arrived. Her crew of 87 moved with practiced efficiency, their hands dancing over control panels while data streamed across multiple displays. These were not the polished personnel of the inner system fleet. They were frontier fighters, volunteers who had chosen the dangerous life of deep space patrol because someone had to watch over the scattered colonies and trading posts that barely showed up on most galactic maps. "Report," Chen commanded as she settled into the captain's chair. Lieutenant Webb turned from the communication station, his young face tight with concern. "Distress beacon from a mining colony called Nexus Prime. They report 30,000 civilians under attack by what sounds like Crimson Horde raiders. The transmission is weak and intermittent, but they are requesting immediate evacuation assistance." Chen felt her jaw tighten. The Crimson Horde had been a thorn in the side of peaceful commerce for years, but they usually targeted isolated freight convoys or small outposts. Attacking a major colony was an escalation that could not be ignored. "Distance to target?" she asked. 17.8 light-years, replied Webb. "At maximum hyperspace velocity, we could be there in 4 hours." "Sir," interrupted Ensign Rodriguez from the tactical station, "our intelligence files show the Crimson Horde typically operates with fleet strengths of 15 to 20 capital ships when conducting major raids. The Defiant is just one cruiser." Chen smiled grimly. Ensign Rodriguez was fresh from the academy, still thinking in terms of fair fights and tactical doctrine. She had not yet learned that sometimes the right thing to do was also the most dangerous thing to do. "Chief Bradley," Chen called to her chief engineer. "How are our systems?" The grizzled veteran looked up from his engineering console with the confidence of someone who had kept starships running through 3 wars and countless emergencies. "All systems green, Captain. Fusion reactors at optimal efficiency, hyperspace drive ready for immediate jump, weapons systems fully charged and operational." "Sergeant Santos," Chen continued, addressing the head of the ship's marine complement, "how many of your people are ready for ground operations?" Sergeant Maria Santos straightened to attention. She was built like a fortress, with scars that told stories of battles fought in defense of people who could not defend themselves. Her 40 Marines were the best fighters the human military could produce, trained specifically for the kind of desperate situations that arose in the Outer Rim. All 40 Marines ready for immediate deployment, Captain. Full combat loadout with heavy weapon support. Chen stood and walked to the main display screen, studying the tactical information they had about Nexus Prime. It was not much, just basic survey data and trade route information. But it showed a peaceful mining world with no military installations and no defensive capabilities. 30,000 innocent people were facing extinction, while she stood here calculating odds. Plot a hyperspace course for Nexus Prime, she ordered. Maximum velocity. Battle stations throughout the ship. Captain, Webb said quietly, the odds of one ship successfully engaging a Crimson Horde fleet are not favorable. Chen turned to face her bridge crew, seeing the mix of determination and concern in their faces. These were good people who had signed up to risk their lives for others, but they deserved to know what they were getting into. You are right, Lieutenant. The odds are not favorable. The Crimson Horde will have us outnumbered at least 15 to 1. They will have superior firepower and better knowledge of the local conditions. By every tactical calculation, we should call for reinforcements and hope we can organize a response before those civilians are all dead or enslaved. She paused, looking each of her officers in the eye. But here is what the tactical calculations do not account for. We are human. We do not abandon innocent people to die just because the odds are bad. We do not let children cry in the darkness while their world burns and tell ourselves it is not our problem. And we certainly do not let scum like the Crimson Horde think they can murder civilians without consequences. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Then Chief Bradley spoke up from his station. Hell, Captain, 15 to 1 odds. That just means we will have to shoot faster. A ripple of grim laughter ran through the bridge crew, and Chen felt the familiar surge of pride that came from commanding the best people in the galaxy. These were the descendants of explorers and pioneers, people whose ancestors had looked at impossible odds and decided to try anyway. Take us to hyperspace, Chen ordered. The stars outside the viewports stretched into lines of light as the Defiant leaped across the impossible distances between worlds. In hyperspace, time moved differently, but Chen used every minute to prepare her ship and crew for what was coming. Marine squads checked their weapons and equipment. Engineering teams ran diagnostics on every critical system. The medical bay prepared for casualties. Dr. James Park, the ship's chief medical officer, coordinated with his staff to set up emergency triage areas. He had served with Chen for 6 years and knew that when humans got involved in situations like this, people were going to get hurt. His job was to make sure as many as possible survived to go home to their families. 4 hours later, the Defiant dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus Prime system, and immediately every sensor screen lit up with contacts. The Crimson Horde fleet was larger than intelligence had suggested, nearly 30 ships arranged in a standard raid formation around the planet. Most were destroyers and light cruisers, but Chen counted at least 5 heavy battleships that could punch through the Defiant's armor without much trouble. "My God," whispered Ensign Rodriguez, "look at the planet." The once beautiful crystal cities of Nexus Prime were burning. Smoke rose from a dozen locations where enemy bombardment had shattered buildings and infrastructure. Enemy transports moved between the fleet and the surface, carrying stolen goods and captured civilians. It was exactly the kind of atrocity that made Chen's blood boil. "Sir, we are being hailed by the Horde flagship," reported Webb. On screen, the face that appeared on the main viewer belonged to Commander Thrix, though Chen did not know his name. She saw only the cold reptilian features of someone who had built a career on causing suffering. His voice carried the arrogant certainty of someone who had never met serious resistance. "Human vessel, you are interfering in a lawful salvage operation. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. You are outnumbered 30 to 1 and have no chance of survival." Chen stepped forward so that her image would fill Thrix's screen. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had faced impossible odds before and lived to tell about it. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Human Ship Defiant. You are attacking innocent civilians in violation of every civilized law in the galaxy. You have 30 seconds to withdraw your forces and release your prisoners, or I will show you what happens when humans get angry." Thrix's laughter was like the sound of breaking glass. "Humans, your species is notorious for your delusions of grandeur. You have one ship against my entire fleet. What can you possibly do?" Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. "Let me show you." The Defiant might have been outnumbered, but it was not outgunned in the way Thrix expected. Human military technology had advanced rapidly in the past decade, driven by encounters with hostile species who thought humans were easy prey. The ship's main weapons were quantum torpedo launchers capable of punching through any armor, and its defensive systems incorporated adaptive shielding that could absorb and redirect incoming energy. But more than technology, the Defiant had something the Crimson Horde could not match: a crew that fought for something greater than themselves. "Target the lead battleship," Chen ordered. "Full spread of quantum torpedoes. Show them we are serious." The space around Nexus Prime erupted in light as the human ship opened fire. The Defiant's torpedoes struck the Horde flagship with devastating effect, cracking its armor and sending secondary explosions rippling through its hull. Thrix's arrogant expression changed to one of shock and fear as his ship shuddered under the unexpected assault. "All ships, concentrate fire on the human vessel." He screamed over the fleet communications channel. "Destroy them." What followed was one of the most extraordinary space battles in recorded history. The Defiant danced between the enemy ships like a fighter among lumbering giants, its superior speed and maneuverability allowing it to avoid the worst of the incoming fire while striking back with surgical precision. Chief Bradley pushed the engines beyond their rated limits, while Lieutenant Webb coordinated targeting solutions that exploited every weakness in the enemy formation. But the real turning point came when Sergeant Santos and her Marines launched their assault shuttles toward the planet's surface. The Vorthak had been hiding in their tunnels for hours, slowly suffocating while enemy forces searched for them above. They had given up hope of rescue when the sound of human weapons fire echoed through the crystal caves. The Marines hit the ground like avenging angels, their powered armor allowing them to move faster and hit harder than any enemy they faced. They used tactics the Crimson Horde had never encountered, coordinating their attacks with precision strikes from the Defiant in orbit. Within minutes, the neat lines of enemy troops were in chaos. Santos led the assault on the main enemy command post, her squad moving with the fluid precision of people who had trained together for years. The Krulek's warriors were tough and aggressive, but they were not prepared for the controlled fury of human soldiers protecting innocent civilians. "Nest 1 to Overwatch," Santos reported over her comm unit as her squad secured the first tunnel entrance. "We have contact with civilian survivors, beginning evacuation procedures." In the tunnels below, Elder Morvac could barely believe what was happening. The sounds of battle were coming closer, but these were different sounds, organized, disciplined, and moving in their direction with clear purpose. When the first human Marine appeared at the tunnel entrance, weapons lowered and hands extended in greeting, many of the Vorthak thought they were hallucinating from oxygen deprivation. "Sir, my name is Corporal Jackson, United Human Marines," the soldier said in accented but understandable Galactic standard. "We are here to get you out of this. Can you help us locate any wounded who need immediate medical attention?" Dr. Keva stepped forward, her 6 arms trembling with relief and exhaustion. "I am the colony's chief medical officer. We have several hundred individuals in critical condition from smoke inhalation and oxygen deprivation. We have medical teams standing by," Jackson assured her. "Our ship's doctor is preparing to receive casualties. You are safe now." Above them, the space battle was reaching its climax. The Defiant had taken severe damage, but it had also destroyed or disabled more than half of the Crimson Horde fleet. The remaining enemy ships were scattered and demoralized, their formation broken by tactics they could not counter. Commander Thrix found himself facing a choice he had never expected to make. His flagship was crippled, his fleet was in ruins, and the human ship was somehow still operational despite impossible odds. The rational thing to do was retreat and live to fight another day. But Thrix was not rational. He was consumed by rage at being humiliated by what he had assumed was an inferior species. Instead of withdrawing, he ordered his remaining ships to ram the human vessel. If he could not win, he would at least take his enemies with him. Captain Chen saw the enemy ships changing course and understood immediately what was happening. The Crimson Horde was making a final desperate assault, and the Defiant was too damaged to outrun them all. All hands braced for collision, she announced over the ship's communication system. It has been an honor serving with you. But Chief Bradley had one more trick up his sleeve. The Defiant's fusion reactors could be overloaded to create a massive energy discharge, but it would require someone to stay behind and manually trigger the sequence. The ship would be destroyed, but the resulting explosion would take out the remaining enemy vessels. "Captain," Bradley said quietly, "I can give you the time you need to evacuate the crew to the planet's surface. But someone needs to stay behind to make sure the reactors blow at the right moment." Chen looked at her chief engineer, this man who had served faithfully for over a decade and was now offering to sacrifice his life for people he had never met. "Tom, I cannot ask you to do that." "You are not asking, Captain. I am volunteering. Those civilians down there deserve to live, and this is the only way to make sure the Horde does not come back to finish what they started." In the end, it was not necessary. The overloaded reactors created exactly the explosion Bradley had calculated, vaporizing the remaining Crimson Horde ships and their crews. But a last-minute breakthrough by the damage control teams allowed the crew to evacuate to emergency pods before the ship was destroyed. Captain Chen found herself sitting in the Crystal Gardens of New Haven 3 days later, watching human medical teams work alongside Vorthak doctors to treat the wounded and traumatized. The colony would survive and rebuild, stronger than before. The Crimson Horde was scattered to the winds, their reputation for invincibility broken forever. Elder Morvac approached her slowly, his 6 arms moving in a gesture of profound gratitude that needed no translation. "Captain Chen," he said in careful Galactic standard, "my people do not have words adequate to express our thanks. You came for us when no one else would. You risked everything for strangers." Chen smiled and shook her head. "Elder Morvac, we did not do this for strangers. The moment we heard your distress call, you became our people. That is what humans do. We protect our people, no matter who they are or where they come from." As she spoke, she could see human engineers working with Vorthak technicians to rebuild the communication arrays. Human Marines were teaching young Vorthak basic self-defense techniques. Dr. Park was sharing medical knowledge that would help the colony prepare for future emergencies. This was what humanity brought to the galaxy, Chen reflected. Not just superior weapons or faster ships, but the simple idea that everyone deserved protection, that no one should face darkness alone, and that sometimes the right thing to do was also the most dangerous thing to do. In the weeks that followed, the story of the Battle of Nexus Prime spread throughout the Outer Rim. Other peaceful species began to understand that there was a new player in galactic affairs, one that would not stand by while the innocent suffered. The age of piracy and casual brutality was ending, not because of superior firepower, but because of superior values. And in the crystal caves beneath New Haven, a small Vorthak named Kelly asked her mother a different question. "Mama, when I grow up, can I be as brave as the humans?" Her mother smiled and held her close. "Yes, little one, we all can."